those kind of things. So again, that's what our focus is going to be today. And we hope that Tyler and Ryan, the two men that are going to be joining us, will be able to offer some content that will be helpful to you and also point you in the right direction for things that you may be interested in. Brittany, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
Where are you from?
I'm from Rogers, Arkansas.
Rogers, Arkansas. Well, we're so glad to have you today. We got some other Arkansas folk on with us, so we're glad to have you with us. Glad that you can be part of this today.
Thank you.
Now, are you a pastor of a church, or you work with the church, or?
Yeah, I'm an associate pastor at Refuge Church.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we're so glad to have you today. Glad that you can be with us. Pastor Tim Redmond, you doing okay? Okay, he's still trying to connect. There we go.
I'm here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Glad to have you, Tim, coming to us from Pennsylvania. Byron Powers, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're no longer vacationing.
No.
Good. Good. All right, Byron is from Ludowici, Georgia. And he's part of our Ludowici. He's part of our team there, our CPE team that works with us. So we're delighted to have him. Pastor Kevin Wells, I see you have joined us. We're glad that you're here with us. Dave Nagel, can you hear me? All right, maybe not yet. We're 5.5 minutes away, and hopefully.
I hear you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. How are you doing these days, physically?
Oh, I'm doing great. Had physical therapy today. Feel good.
Pastor Nagel's a part of our coaching network and was riding his motorcycle with his wife a few weeks ago, and a deer came out of the woods and slammed into their motorcycle, and they both had significant injuries that had to be treated. And so we're glad you're doing better, Pastor Dave. He pastors in the state of Pennsylvania as well. So glad he's doing much better. Pastor Larry Daughtry, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So I understand you're overcoming COVID-19.
Yes, sir.
Fantastic.
Yes, sir. We had a big outbreak. Well, not a big. I'll say we had 11 people in our church to have it, and I lost 3 individuals in our church from it.
Well, I'm glad you're doing better, and we're glad to have you on with us today.
Yes, sir.
Tyler, can you and Ryan hear me okay? Good. Fantastic. We're glad you guys are here. We'll be introducing you to the group in just a moment. We're 4.5 minutes away from our start, so we're just glad everybody's able to jump in here with us. It looks like everybody's making connection real well. And technology is powerful, and we're glad we get to marshal it a little bit and use it for something for the kingdom. And glad all of you have taken time to be with us today. We are recording the session, and you'll have access to the recording as well. It will be, you'll get an email link that will allow you then to access the recording, so that if you miss something today that you want to make sure you go back and grab, you'll be able to do that. Bob Drummond, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. All right, good. All right. All right, we are just a moment or two away from starting, and we're giving time for just a couple more people that are trying to enter in. And there may be others that will be joining us as we go along. Here comes one of our Louisiana pastors that was in the direct hit from Hurricane Laura, so it'll be good to hear from him that he's doing well. There you go. Jeff Kibbe, can you hear me all right? All right, Jeff Kibbe, can you hear me? All right, well, we'll go on then. Okay, we want to begin with a word of prayer today, and I want to thank all of you for joining us for what is going to be the first of 3 webinars that we are going to be offering. My name is Bill Isaacs, and I am the director of the Center for Pastoral Excellence. We have been tasked to develop global strategies for training pastors around the world, and we are excited for the responsibility that we have and the network that we have with pastors like you. These webinars have been designed to partner with the PTS Thrive program, and they are providing the generous support that enables us to provide these. This is an agency of the Church of God Pentecostal Theological Seminary that is housed in Cleveland, Tennessee. And we are very thankful to President Michael L. Baker and Dr. Dan Tomberlin, who is the project coordinator and director for the Thrive program, for their financial assistance that allowed us to offer these webinars free of charge. PTS Thrive is the Lilly Foundation's initiative to help pastors in the United States thrive. And if you would like to have more information about this program, you can access it at ptsthrive.org. I'll have Don put that in the chat side so that you'll be able to see that, but that's ptsthrive.org for more information. The focus today is on building communication and connection strategies for your local church. We are imagining the environments and contexts of our churches as we navigate the pandemic and beyond. We've identified through our forward coaching networks that pastors are very interested in knowing how to keep their congregations connected and engage with their communities, even in situations where local churches are not able to publicly gather now. And I know there are several of you that are on here with us that your local governments are restricting your public gathering. And so this, again, is part of the reason we're doing this. The format today is going to be able to, our format today is to have each of our guests take about 10 minutes or so each and present to you the relevant information from their organizations that are available to your church in the areas of communication and connection. And then we want to take the remaining time for questions and interaction with them and the dialogue that we would have with them. We're going to ask you to use the chat section, which is on your right, or should be available to you on your right, or at least the button will be at the bottom of the screen. Use the chat section for posting your questions. There are members of our team that are on here today that will be monitoring those, and then we will direct those questions to Tyler and Ryan as we get to that particular part. I'll be monitoring that as well, and I'm going to do my very best to make sure your question gets answered. If for some reason your question is not answered, we will do our very best to get an answer to you as quickly as we can. At the conclusion of our time today, we're going to be announcing the wonderful expressions that Ryan and Tyler are bringing with them today. Both of them are giving a 1-year subscription to their respective programs, the Church Marketing University and Text in Church. So when this is over, one of you is going to win a 1-year subscription to either or of those. So there'll be 2 winners drawn. And this is one of the benefits that you got from registering. You'll also be receiving an additional offer by text or email before the night is over about how you can qualify for additional scholarships for coaching if you are not already in our forward coaching network. So you can look forward to that. For the benefit of everybody, we're going to ask you to keep your microphone muted unless you're speaking. And I'll be, of course, watching. If you need to speak or ask a question, if you'll raise your hand, we'll do our very best to recognize you. I'm very happy to have the members of my CPE team on today. They're going to be working with us and helping us. Let me quickly identify them for you. We have Bill Holcomb, who is from Franklin, Virginia. We also have Byron Powers from Ludowici, Georgia, Kevin Wells from New Oxford, Pennsylvania, and Don Steffi from Strasburg, Virginia, who is our engineer today. And we're glad that Don is doing that. He's stepping in for Pastor Kevin, who's a bit under the weather, and we're going to get through that very well. So let me have a word of prayer with you, and then we're going to jump right into our program today. Father, we're grateful for the privilege and opportunity that we have together with pastors all over the United States. And we ask today that you will help us to learn everything that we are supposed to learn, everything that we can learn. Lord, every one of us has a desire to be obedient and faithful in the assignment and responsibilities that you've given us. And so we pray today that Tyler and Ryan will be used of God to help us to know how we can take the next step and help our churches to do the things that God has called us to do. We pray your blessings on them and their ministries and all that they represent, their families. And we ask you, God, that you will make this today everything it should be for your glory and your honor. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. We are pleased today to have as our guest Tyler Smith, who is the co-founder of Texton Church and works with local churches all over the United States to build what he says in his bio, simple communication strategies. And I love that, Tyler, because I like simple strategies. We also have Ryan Wakefield, who is the founder of Church Marketing University that's based out of Kansas City, Missouri. His organization served many local churches around the country with key strategies for engagement and marketing. And it's my understanding from earlier today that they're working together. So they each are going to take their 10 minutes and put them together for a 20-minute presentation. They're going to kind of tag team that together. They worked together before. So Tyler, Ryan, thank you so much for being with us. We're grateful that you're here. We're going to turn it over to you, and we look forward to what you have to say. Welcome.
Awesome. Bill, thanks so much. We're honored to get to share with you guys today. We're looking forward to it. Ryan and I are both from here in Kansas City. So we are friends outside of work, and then our work intersects in some pretty significant ways. So we're happy to be able to share some of that. Ryan, you want to say anything before we jump off?
Yeah, just happy to be here. If you guys have questions along the way, it is always best that the conversation revolves around how we can help you the most. So please make use of the chat. And so we can really make sure that as we're giving ideas and talking through strategies, that it's really is most helpful to you guys in your church, in your context. So put a lot of feedback in the text. You can also do some reactions. I know Zoom has some reactions built in. So if something resonates or whatever, you can use those. And then one thing maybe we could just practice is Tyler and I are both here in Kansas City. So we're both fans of the Chiefs. So I think they're our pick to win the Super Bowl. So what's your guys' team of choice? Maybe outside of football, it could be baseball, it could be basketball, but maybe throw that in the chat as well so we could have some fun there and you guys can practice at least interacting that way and then keep that going because that's really going to make the most of our time here.
Yeah. So Ryan and I, as we were preparing for this, we're trying to get into the mindset of all church leaders today. And life has been hard for the last 6 months and we've been surviving, but there's few of us that have really been thriving through this, right? This has been hard. There's no doubt about it. But it's our hope, it's our prayer that we as the church, we can start to turn around that corner and we can begin to thrive. And so what we want to do is to share some of the ways that we see churches that have made that transition and are actually, their community itself is thriving. They're also reaching new people in their community. And so many of us have been, and necessarily have been just focused on our members, on our tribe, our flock. And now we want to be able to open our eyes to back to our real purpose of reaching everyone in our community. And so I think we've got some strategies that are going to really help us to do that. Ryan, I think you, as we were talking, the very first thing that you brought up was, it sounds kind of basic, but the number one thing that we can do right now is to keep it personal. especially for the churches that are not meeting in person. You want to talk about some of the ideas that you had there?
Yeah, and you're gonna keep hearing that theme of how do we move from just surviving as a church to thriving, and then talking about churches that we see kind of make that leap. What are they doing? And so this is a big one, is that they are making their communications and connections very, very personal. So the churches that are keeping people connected and moving forward and not kind of falling through the cracks are finding ways to reach out personally. And Tyler, can talk about this with Text in Church. Text message is a great way to do that. Text in Church allows you to do both personal communications, but in a kind of a mass scale. So that's kind of a way to save you time. So you have plenty of time to just dialogue back and forth. I know a lot of churches are making personal phone calls. So it's just becoming part of the regular rhythms of the pastoral team to, hey, we're just every single week, we're going to make sure we're reaching out and we're just personally connecting with our people, making personal, like handwritten notes. So as the world has kind of gotten crazier and crazier, the importance of our communication being personal and our people feeling like, our church really loves us, really cares about us, wants to check in, wants us to make sure that we're doing okay. Like that has been really, really huge. So personal is huge. One thing I would say is show me by reaction, maybe using Zoom reaction, who leverages some sort of tool like Text in Church to be able to text message your entire congregation using software. So you can send out a text to everybody right now, or maybe you can segment that and say, hey, I want to text all my volunteers or leaders, or I want to be able to shoot a text to every parent. Or does anybody currently use a tool like Text in Church? So I'm seeing Kevin's giving me a thumbs up. Is anybody else right now use a tool to help you on that front? Tyler, I don't know if you even want to talk about how churches now are leveraging like a tool like that to, yes, keep it very personal, but maximize their time.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways we can think about it is if you had an unlimited amount of time, which we don't, but if you did, what are the ways that you would be reaching out to your church, right? How could you be checking in on your church family on a weekly basis, perhaps? And so like just a prime example is, what if you could send out a text message to everybody in your church and it said, hey, Kevin, Pastor Tyler here. We got a family event coming up and I just thought of you and your family. I wanted to reach out. Anything we can pray for you about? Right? Like that message, what do you think they're going to do when they receive a message like that? They're going to reply. And that's a ministry opportunity, right? So it's not about just using a tool to be able to just yell information out. It's not like, hey, come to church. That's not the purpose of any technology. The purpose of technology is always to bring people together when it's done right? Like oftentimes we're like, oh, technology has segmented everyone and we just all sit on our computers and yell at each other on Facebook. And there's some truth to that, no doubt. But when done properly, we're leveraging technology to bring folks together. And we as the church have an amazing opportunity to be able to do that. And so I think it's really, really important that we think about what are all of the ways that we can send out a message that is so personal that it's going to solicit a response. Because what you send out the first time isn't what matters. It's what comes back to you and then how you're then able to interact with that person. So you're going to get responses back of saying, yeah, my mom was just diagnosed with cancer, or we're traveling and we're not going to be able to be at worship this weekend. Like almost no matter what they say is an opportunity for ministry. And so it's really, really important that we see communication as ministry. It's not this other segment of the church or of the hierarchy that we have created for ourselves. Church communications is ministry. And when done right, you have more opportunity through text message, especially if you're distant. If you're doing online worship right now, like our opportunity for face-to-face communication is very, very, very small. But if we can have personal conversations with people, it makes a massive, massive impact. And think about just in your personal life, like the people that you text with are the people that you care about, right? So there's this really intimate piece of that whole puzzle of, hey, we use our phones to text with the people we love. And we as the church love our community. And so we have to just kind of enter ourselves right into that same conversation that's already happening just we as the church have to step in and be able to do that.
Let's jump to point number 2 that we want to make sure that is on your guys' radar. And it's kind of an overflow from point number 1. And it comes out of this assessment that we've done at Church Marketing University, where we wanted to study what growing churches were doing that plateaued or declining churches weren't doing. So we surveyed about 3,000 churches, and we were trying to identify some of those key points that would say, statistically, churches that are growing, these are their hallmarks of a growing church that you don't find like really at play for churches that kind of hit a plateau or they're declining. So we identified 7 things. We don't have time really to get into all 7 things on that. But one of the biggest factors that made a statistical difference for a church, if this was the case, there was a big kind of flashing light that this church was more than likely to be a growing church. And it was this, is that growing churches are led by leaders that prioritize reaching the next generation. Growing churches are led by leaders that prioritize reaching the next generation. So as we're kind of looking at churches now that are moving from survival mode to thriving, what I would encourage you guys to do is not forget about the kids and students. I think in the last 5 months or so, like, it's been really hard because a lot of our kids ministries, we haven't been able to have those in-person experiences, and that's been really, really tricky. So what I would just say is, how can your church make sure that kids aren't being left behind? So when it comes to things like we were talking about, like following up with people and utilizing something like Text in Church to text your congregation and say, hey, how can we be praying with you today? One of the things that you want to consider is, how can your church also be following up and checking in with the kids that are represented in your church? So do you have your kids team maybe check in and say, hey, how can we be praying for Caitlin? How's she doing? How's school going? Do you guys need anything? Because not only does that make a big difference for the kid, it makes a huge statement to the parents. Because if the parents feel like my kids are being ministered to at our church, then man, I'm telling you, they will stick with your church through the thick and the thin. So one of the ideas that we did at Summit Park Church, this has been a while now, but we weren't able to meet obviously over Easter in person. And so we had our kids team and all our kids volunteers deliver baskets to every kid's house as just a way to say, hey, I know we're not able to do our typical fun stuff and worship together, but we were able to make a statement and say, hey, we're thinking about you, we care about you, and here's something that we pray brightens your day and your week in a very tricky time. So with churches that are kind of moving out of survival mode are kind of now getting this, okay, what are we going to be doing now for kids and youth so that we can continue to minister to them, even though that may look different right now. And why don't we do this too real quick, and then Tyler, I'll throw it over to you to add on to that. But how many of you guys, you're right now able to have your kids ministry meeting in person? So give me a thumbs up if you currently have your kids meeting in person, or give me the clap reaction if maybe you're not able to meet in person. So everybody right now, for a lot of them, so okay, so for a lot of you guys, there's a few coming in here. I know, Tyler, you guys right now aren't meeting in person for your church, but Tyler, what would you add to point number 2?
Yeah, I think something that our church, so I go to Church of the Resurrection, which is a very large church here in Kansas City. About 20,000 people worship there, and we go to their downtown campus. So it's a smaller campus, but it's still part of a really large church. And we received essentially like invite cards in the mail that were addressed to each of my children, inviting them to schedule a Zoom call with a children's minister. So someone that they love. Sarah is somebody that they would get the opportunity to talk to. And so it was actually neater for me and my wife to receive that than it was for my kids, but the impact was massive, right? My kids are super shy, and so they're like, I don't want to do that. And they didn't, but the impact still held true. So our family, it just felt really good to have them thinking about, well, what are the ways? Because online worship for kids isn't so great, right? Like, my kids hate it. It's boring to them. And so it's really hard to keep them paying attention. And if I'm honest with you, most of the time we fail at that. They don't pay attention the whole time. It's really hard when you're at home. And so that was just this really personal way for them to reach out and extend an invitation. And I'm sure some kids did it and some didn't, but the thought behind it is what actually mattered the most in that instance. So think about what are the ways that you could possibly be reaching out to them, just recognizing, and even if you're meeting in person, maybe that's still a good idea, right? Like there's, kids in Kansas City, we've got about 30% of families in Kansas City, 30 to 40% of families in Kansas City are doing distance learning right now. Well, distance learning is hard. I was telling Ryan about this, my family is really struggling with it right now. And having personal one-on-one connection is really, really important. And the school teachers aren't really able to do that. They're talking to a group, and just like this, like we're not really talking one-on-one. Our conversation would be different if it was just two of us on here. And so recognize that there might be lots of really incredible opportunities to connect with a child. And you could have a team of volunteers that actually oversee this. So it might not be extra work on your plate. That's something that Ryan and I are always attentive to is you guys wear a million hats and you have 8 million things on your to-do list. The last thing that we want from this conversation is for you to have a whole bunch of new stuff added to your to-do list. We hope that we can help you to check things off and make life a little bit easier on you. And so I think for me, that's a really important aspect, is focus on the children, because when you focus on children, you are gonna reach the young families in your community. And so the folks in your church will benefit from that, but then also the community at large will start to hear about that. You'll develop a reputation, and then you'll end up having new families coming in. So I think that's a really important one. How many of you, Ryan, you kind of posed it, how many of you are worshiping or your kids are able to worship in person? How many of you are doing a hybrid approach right now? So you're doing online worship, but then, or in person, sorry, you're doing in-person worship, but then you also still have a good portion of people that are worshiping online. How many of you kind of have one foot in both spaces right now? Yeah. Okay, so that's what we expected, and that's definitely the case here in Kansas City. Ryan, let's talk a little bit about how do you navigate this, right? This is a new challenge for us, because what we're seeing is a lot of churches got really excited when they were able to go back, and they just kind of forgot about everything that was happening online. And you have a portion of families at your church that aren't yet comfortable coming back, and so it's possible that they're feeling a little bit neglected, a little bit ignored right now, because they see all these pictures on Facebook of everybody coming back, and that's where all the focus is. But meanwhile, their family's over here saying, hey, but what about us? So Ryan, let's talk about some of the ways that we can help to build up both at the same time. And essentially you're doing all the work already. So all we need to do is to help people to understand that, hey, we have these two options.
Yeah, one of the latest studies that I saw, this is not of church people, this is of community at large in Jackson County where we're at, was something along the lines of 70% of people in general, again, these aren't Christians, these aren't churchgoers, 70% of our just community members aren't ready to come back to in-person, like big congregational type settings, large group gatherings. And so one of the things that we're seeing, again, for churches that are really thriving right now is they're giving a next step that makes sense for everybody in their community. So if our churches are kind of have this mentality that, hey, when you're ready to come back in person, now we're ready to minister to you, we could be, based on the area and the feelings are in and around your area, you could be excluding the vast majority of your community. So I know that gets tricky because the hybrid approach is a little bit tricky on multiple fronts, but one of the things that we see these thriving churches doing is giving a next step that allows everybody to take their spiritual next step. One of the churches we work with a lot is a church planter down in New Orleans, Pastor Ryan Keller down there, Church on a Mission, and he's changed. So they've done a whole lot of built around a strategy called Plan Your Visit. Now, have any of your churches traditionally done, even before COVID, done a Plan Your Visit strategy? Where on your website, you encourage community members to plan their visit so that if they're thinking about coming and visit your church, like you give them a great experience, you walk them through that, you send them reminders. So a couple on this, but Ryan Keller has shifted that over now to Plan Your Experience. And what that allows the person to do in the community there in New Orleans is they now go through the steps and they get to decide, hey, do I want the digital worship experience or do I want the in-person worship experience? And he's having a lot of great success with that, giving the people the option. So I think this last week he was telling me they had 5 families in the New Orleans area plan their experience. I think 3 of them said, hey, we want to do digital. We want to worship with you digitally. And then 2 of the families plan their experience to actually come visit in person. So giving your community, giving your church a next step that everybody can take is really, really important. And here's one thing I would just caution you is a lot of the friends I talk to more on a personal level. These aren't pastors or church leaders. These are more just friends. What they're saying to me is it feels like my church has this mentality that unless we're ready to come visit in person or come worship again in person, that we're dead to them. That basically like, hey, when you're ready to come back and be in person, that then we're ready to minister to you. So I would just caution you, don't neglect people who you've spent a lot of time developing a relationship with now digitally, that maybe they're not ready to come back, but they are still tracking with you digitally. So giving everybody a next step that makes sense based on where they are is a big thing that we're seeing right now. Churches that are thriving are doing. Tyler, I'll kick it to you to add anything on that.
And I think that points back to the idea of we're not just ministering to our flock. We have an entire community that we're trying to reach. And so by broadening that up, being careful that the language on our homepage is inclusive for folks that want to come into person, but also for people that want to worship online. And it also then, I'll bring it back just to your actual flock. You need to know who at your church plans to worship in person and who at your church plans to worship online. Okay? Because if you know that, then you can speak to them intelligently. Like the worst thing you could do is to send a text message. Like my family is playing this all really, 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 really safe. So my kids are doing distance learning. Our church isn't open yet, but when it opens this next month, we're not planning to attend. We're going to keep doing it online. If you keep sending me messages to come show up, that's going to rub me wrong at some point. And there's a flip side of this, right? There's other people that are like, no, let's go right now. If you keep telling them to come online, like I'm not coming online. I'm coming every single Sunday and I'm going to be sitting in the front row. Why would you keep sending me messages to come join you online? So you need to find that answer out. And the best way you can do that is by a survey, right? So you need to know everyone at your church, what are their plans? What's their family's plans? And then you need to accommodate those so that when you send out messages to them, you can be right on point saying, hey, hope to see you online at 10 a.m. I'm so pumped for today's message. Here's the link, right? If you send that out every Sunday morning at 9:45, guess what's going to happen? More people are going to start worshiping with you online, because the reason they're not worshiping with you is because life gets in the way. It's hard to do it when you didn't plan to get in the car and drive and you know, I know it's going to be on Facebook later on. I could watch it at any time, but it's better for everyone if they watch it live. So send out that link, and that can be really, really impactful. So in like the secular world, we call that segmenting your list, so that you have buckets of people, right? So when we're talking about something that's going to be just for online people, we know who are the people that this is relevant to. When we're talking about something in person, we need to know which of those people are relevant to that. So that can be done really, really easy. SurveyMonkey is a great way to do that. But there's tons of other ways as well. If you have a Facebook group, as people are entering your group, that can be one of the questions that you're asking them. So that it's just critical that you start to get that information so that you can then leverage it to communicate the right message to the right people at the right time. Does that make sense to everybody? You can see how that could be pretty impactful.
Tyler, we've got a question coming in that was just saying, hey, what tips do you have to build engagement with online participators? So I think that's a pretty important one if we want to take that real quick. And I will put a link to an article that we've done at Church Marketing University that basically gives you 15 different ideas on that. Our major suggestion when it comes to that is for your digital and online worship experiences, you've got to move people from spectating to participating. And I share this in that article that I grew up in going to church at Broken Arrow Assembly of God, Pentecostal church. And my parents, we kind of had one major rule in the Wakefield household, and that was you don't sit in the balcony. Like that was like if my mom and dad caught you in the balcony, like that was worse than probably doing drugs at the Wakefield household, because worship is a participation sport, and you need to be participating. So we were always down in the front 2 to 3 rows. We were there every single, Sunday night, Wednesday night. And so it's just been ingrained to me that worship is about participation, not about spectating. And so one of the things that we've coached a lot on for churches is make sure that your digital experiences aren't creating a whole bunch of spectators, that it doesn't become the digital balcony of your church. So I would even caution you, be careful on the language that you use. So if you're doing a hybrid approach and you're saying, hey, we want to give a shout out, and we want to say thanks to those of you who are watching online, like you just said, you're not really worshiping with us, you're watching, you're in that digital balcony. So I get rid of the words watching, the words online. Like even saying online, you're creating an us versus them mentality. And so I would just make sure like that your language encourages participation, engagement. You could say, hey, we want to welcome everybody who's worshiping with us today. For those who are worshiping online, and then give them a call to action. You need to have calls to action if you're doing a hybrid approach that people online can engage with, whether they're leaving comments, they're engaging. You have leadership that's rostered, so your volunteers are rostered in the digital to provide a great experience over there. But that's kind of the big mindset shift that really helps pastors and churches, is making sure that your digital experiences aren't just aren't just spectators, that's really creating people who are participating. It's not just more content to binge, because our families don't need more content to binge, that it is a worship experience that they are participating in. And I don't have time to get into all of those 15 different things that we talked about in that article, but I'll post that in the link, in the link there.
Ryan,
Yeah.
let me interrupt here. So Ryan is a master of this. If you guys haven't noticed that throughout this conversation we've been having, there's been multiple times where Ryan has asked people to give a hand raise, or to give a thumbs up, or to comment over there. Most of you on this call have engaged in some way. Okay, so he's creating a culture of engagement, right? And he started at the very beginning. One of the very first things that came out of his mouth was, hey, what's your favorite football team? Okay, that really has no relevance to what we're talking about today, but it did, because it started a little bit of a conversation. It set the tone that there's an expectation that you're going to engage with us, because we're now answering questions that are coming in, and that's just part of it, right? So we're able to then cater our message to you so that everyone gets the most benefit out of this as possible. You could be doing the exact same thing within a worship service. Be thoughtful about what are the opportunities that you can invite and encourage engagement. And I think that's a huge miss that so many churches are doing for lots of reasons. So one, so that the worshiper feels to be a part of it. We don't want them feeling like they're in the balcony. The other aspect of it is, if you're doing this on Facebook or YouTube, you're missing out on massive social media and social proof, right? So if you have 100 people in your community that are all tuned in on Facebook right now watching you, and they're commenting and they're liking, their friends are seeing that. So now you have the ability, and it's just occurring. You are now in the homes of hundreds of people in your community, right? And so some of them are going to be one of those 3-second watchers, right? And that skews all our numbers, but not everyone, right? So yes, maybe you had 1,000 people watch for 3 seconds, and we can't get too excited about that because they only stayed for 3 seconds. But what if you had one person that watched the whole thing, right? They literally were just sitting there on their phone, scrolling through Facebook, and then boom, the timing was right. They needed that message, and they sat there through the entire thing. And now you have an opportunity to engage with this person, right? So if throughout your worship experience, there was opportunities for them to engage, there was maybe, hey, if you're watching online right now, and you're new to this community, just text the word welcome to this number, or just click the link here for our digital connection card. And now you're having an opportunity, because now you can follow up with them. Now you can actually build true relationship with them. And maybe that moment didn't change their life, but moments like that repeated can change an entire community. And so I think it's really, really important that we're thoughtful about having opportunities, multiple opportunities, because especially if they're online, an online worshiper is different than in person. If I come and visit your church for the very first time, I have no choice, pretty much no choice, but to sit there throughout the entire worship service. It's not that like that online, right? I might watch it for 5 minutes and then bounce. I might watch it for 20 minutes. I might watch it for 10 seconds. That's up to me. And you're never going to know that I did it, right? So like I am this anonymous viewer. But if during that time, it's compelling, I start to engage a little bit. And then there's a call to action of like, hey, if this makes sense to you, if you're looking for a faith home, we would love it if you just click the link below and complete the digital connection card so we can send you some more information about our church, right? So there's just little simple things that we can be doing and put that on repeat through every one of your online worships. And you are now going to be reaching your community in ways that we just never have had the opportunity to do before. You're reaching people that had no intention of finding you. Does that make sense? Like when we worship in person, they have to in their own mind decide, I am going to put my family in a car and we're going to drive to this place we've never been before. And it's going to be really awkward. And we're going to walk in there and feel out of place. It's going to be so uncomfortable. My kids aren't going to like it because they're super introverted. And we're going to go through all of that just so we can find out if this is a cool faith home for us. Or the person who's at home watching a football game and then realizes, oh, wow, Joey down the street just liked this worship service. I don't even know who this is, but now all of a sudden I find myself watching it just during a commercial. I had no intention of watching it, and now I'm hooked, right? You see how that can happen? So I just want to give huge encouragement to, as your church becomes more and more in person, don't give up, don't lose focus on the online aspect as well, because I think it's one of the biggest opportunities we have to reach our community. So that's just critically important for us.
Tyler, real quick, there's a question coming in the comments about worship, because that is one of the trickiest parts about your digital experience, is how you solve the worship on there. So I put another article that includes a section on music, and it'll cover the CCLI license, royalty-free music, ways to pull this off. In terms of that, if you're trying to navigate that, one of my favorite ways is to keep it as simple as possible. Simplicity is going to be your friend for digital worship. The more moving parts that you add, the more complex it gets, the harder it is to get a good mix. So somebody on an acoustic guitar or one person on a piano can go a long way. So don't feel like you have to put on a big deal. It actually, another thing that we talk a lot about that ties all this together is when it's digital, you're no longer leading large auditoriums, you're leading living rooms in worship. So if you're in somebody's living room at a small group, you probably wouldn't have 5 people up there singing, a full drum set. Leading worship in living rooms is different than leading large auditoriums. Our in-person services are designed the way they are because they're for larger auditoriums. So for digital, don't neglect just keeping it really, really simple can be your friend. One person on an acoustic guitar can be way more effective because that's way more natural for somebody worshiping in their living room. So the other thing that you can do as well, if you're still not able to solve the worship, is you could have a pre-service watch party. Is anybody familiar with watch parties on Facebook? Yeah, so basically what a watch party does, so if your service maybe starts at 10 o'clock, at 9:30 a.m., you could have a pre-service watch party. Essentially, a watch party allows you to play back any video that is publicly available on Facebook. You set it up as a playlist. And so at 9:30, you could have worship from the best bands in the entire world. It creates a live experience. You could pray for each other. You could worship together. And then you could put a link that says, hey, our service is now starting. So if it really was a problem, that solves all your licensing issues. You can use any worship song that's available on Facebook. But that is one way to get around in a very Facebook appropriate way, is to do a pre-service worship watch party. And you could build up an audience that when your service kicks off live, you now have a lot of people that were already worshiping and praying with you who are now ready to be there live for your service as well. So that's another way that we're seeing churches solve that. But that article has some links and some ideas for you as well.
Good. That's good.
Thanks, Ryan. Hey, Ryan, there's a couple of questions coming in about text messaging, about texting a whole bunch of people without blowing up people's phones. So yes, you definitely want to caution. You don't want to be sending group text messages out to your entire congregation. That would be super bad, because then everyone's going to be getting all those replies. So text messages need to be sent as individual messages to each person. A platform like Text in Church allows you to do that with one click. So if I had all of you guys in our database and I wanted to send out a quick text message, I could go in there, say, send a message to everybody in this group, type up my message, hit send, and then it's going to automatically send out hundreds of individual messages, inserts their first name in there so that everyone feels that like it is personal. And in the way that you craft that message, that's critically important, so that I'm not writing a message to 100 people. I'm writing a message to one person. It just happens to be going to 99 others. Does that make sense? When you write in your head, you got to be thinking that way so that it feels really, really personal. And then those replies will only come back to you. So when people reply, it doesn't go to anyone else. It just comes right back to you. And then you can handle those. And then Byron is asking, he says, we use Text in Church. How can we better encourage a person that texts welcome to fill out the digital connection card? So kind of what that process looks like is somebody texts a keyword to your local telephone number. Then Text in Church will automatically text them back with a link to their digital connection card. So we set all that up for him. So Byron didn't have to create his own digital connection card. Text in Church platform does that. But then they click that link. And then when they click the link, a little form pops up where they can then enter in their contact information. When they do that, it automatically puts the person's contact info into Text in Church and then starts a follow-up sequence. So he doesn't have to send out all of his follow-up messages. It can automatically send out emails for him, automatically send out text messages. You can even send reminders to the staff saying, hey, this person was a visitor on Sunday. Let's give them a call on Tuesday morning. Let's write them a handwritten note on Monday morning, get that in the mail right away. We can do all of those things in a very automated fashion. So Byron, to answer your question, how do you get more people to do it? It's in how you present it, right? So if I wanted you all to fill out a connection card, let me see if I've got one here real quick that I can actually give you. Yeah, so if you guys will actually pull out your phone right now, if you will text the keyword of online, so just text the word online to 816-482-3337. Ryan, could you put that in the chat for me? Yeah. Online to 816-482-3337. So when you do that, you're going to get a text message back with a link. Just click that link. That digital connection card will pop up. When you fill that out, we're actually going to send you our guest follow-up, our live stream guest follow-up plan. So you're going to get all the templates, emails, text messages, all the scripts already pre-written for you. So you're going to have that. That'll be yours. And so what I just did there is I told you every step that you're going to have to do, right? So I didn't just say text online to that number and then stop. I then said you're going to get a text message back, click that link, and then fill out that form. And so by me being very explicit about what the steps are going to be, now you're much, much more likely to actually finish it. And then Byron, also a secret is anyone that doesn't fill that out. So inside Text in Church, if you text in, but you don't complete the digital connection card, we will have your phone number, but I'll have no idea who you are, right? So what we'll do is tomorrow, we'll send you a text message that says, hey, thanks so much for joining us online for the conversation. We had a great time. Hey, I didn't catch your name though. Would you mind telling me what your name is? And then you're gonna be like, oh, that's awesome. Tyler's texting me. And then you're gonna tell me your name, and then we'll add that into the database. And then I'll say, hey, I'd love to send you a quick email. What's your email address? And you'll tell me that, and I'll add that in the database. So in the ideal world, you will all fill out the digital connection card, and I won't have to do that. If you don't, then I have to do a little bit of manual work, and I'll reach out to you to get that additional information. Does that make sense? And yes, Text in Church integrates with Planning Center and CCB and MailChimp.
Lots of good questions coming in the chat.
Yeah.
Some of them we don't have time to probably dive into all of them, but I'm trying to link over to resources that I know will help answer that. So I gave a link for the social media policies template. You can download a template there and customize it and make it for your church. It's a free template that you can use there, and it's got a whole bunch of other examples ones as well. So yeah, I think and Shane, I think that number should be there in the chat as well. Tyler, I know we had, I think, 3 other areas that we were going to talk through, but we might be running low on time. And so any questions that you have, let me just throw out the one last one I think is really, really important, that churches that are thriving right now are keeping an external focus on outreach. And they're asking this question, and somebody help me put this in the chat. They're asking this question: what does our community need right now, and how can we help? What does our community need right now, and how can we help? And we're having like story after story from our churches coming in of saying, when we asked that question, we came up with this answer, and man, it is doing wonders for us. And they're reaching out to like their school systems and saying, hey, how can we help? Their local governments, local nonprofits. We had one church that down in Los Alamos, they set up a Love Los Alamos fund, and the church gave to the fund. And then they give people in the church the ability that if they see a need in their city, they can meet it by using funds from the fund. And we're hearing story after story after story of churches that maintain an external focus of, man, our community needs us right now. It is really helping them, and it's really helping rally the church as far as keeping them connected and not falling off, is because it's giving the church the ability to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. And a church years from now is going to want to look back and say, you know what, we made a difference. The fact that our church exists and that our church was ministering to our community is better off because of that. So we're seeing a lot of different churches that are now kind of moving out of survival mode. They're going to their school systems and say, hey, how can we serve you? We had one in Berkeley, California. They're not very pro-church in Berkeley, but this church, it's a brand new church plant. Just by going to the school system and saying, hey, we want to be here to help. Can we put digital supplies together for students who are going through this? And it's given them open doors to connect with a school system and governments that aren't very pro-church. So we're seeing that story after story, that if a church will say, what does our community need right now and how can we help? It is helping rally the church, keep people plugged in around some sort of goal, and it really, really helps. So yeah, seeing some comments coming in here of cool stories. But Tyler, what would you?
Ryan, let me share an idea that kind of piggybacks on that. So my older brother's out in Sacramento, California. So actually just up the road from Berkeley, and he co-leads a church plant there. They worship, I don't know, about 350, 400 people on a typical Sunday, and they're all online right now. And so they put out signs, just kind of blanketed East Sacramento, with these yard signs that said, in this together. And from that, they had awesome attendance online. They've actually grown through the pandemic, and it's been really effective for them. But through that, someone at their church ended up hearing about someone who needed a car. And this person needed a car in order to be able to keep and maintain their job, and they couldn't afford it. And that conversation went through one of their small groups. And then someone at their church said, you know what, I've got $4,000. I'll put up $4,000. Let's see if we can get it matched. And so what ended up happening is that person that had the $4,000 decided, you know what, let's actually get them a nice car. Like, let's not get them a car that's going to break down on them. Let's get them a good one. And so they changed their donation from $4,000 to $8,000. Other people threw in money. And this person who was in desperate need was a single mother, was in desperate need of an automobile. And this church, who had, like, that's not a ministry goal of theirs, is to provide people with automobiles, right? But they saw a need. They asked that question: what does this person need? How can we change this person's life? And now that person has an automobile that's going to allow them to maintain a job and be able to care for their children. And so, like, it can start really, really small. That started with a yard sign, right? And then it turned into this other thing. And the church is now able to talk about that and rallies the community together, even though they cannot meet in person. Yet they're maybe more connected than they ever have been before through doing ministry in new and creative ways. And it might not be 100% on point with who you thought you were called to do. Like there is no way on their 5-year plan 5 years ago they said they were going to purchase an automobile, right? That wasn't what they were called to do. But life happened, the pandemic happened, and no one was expecting to be doing church from home either. But that's where we find ourselves. And so just know that even as much as this sucks, it does, it's really, really hard. As much as it sucks, there is still opportunity for us to reach people in really life-changing, life-giving ways. So I just want to offer that as an encouragement of, this little communication idea of, hey, let's put some yard signs out and see what happens. Let's just try to bring the community together, actually turned into something that created momentum, that actually grew their church, reached people that had no intention of coming to church. It's kind of a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and right now, I would just say anything that you do on this community outreach front almost counts as double. It's almost like a matching, because people are so starved for good news that it goes so far. So a couple things that we've seen at Summit Park Church is we partnered with a local business here, a Continental Siding Supply out of Kansas City, and worked with them to build a few kind of mobile food pantries that go up at local schools. And that was picked up by the Kansas City news outlets. It's just something simple. It just allows like the local elementary schools to put out a food pantry so people can get food as needed. That got a whole bunch of press. We try to share these stories on social media, throughout the week. We try to share them in our weekend services. So, man, I don't know if I can think of a week that's gone by in this whole pandemic where the church hasn't shared some sort of cool community outreach story. And so like this last week, we rallied a whole bunch of people together, volunteers together. We partnered with Habitat for Humanity, and we helped build a local person a home, and that's what they were sharing on Sunday morning. And so let me also tell you the byproduct of what happens when your church does that. And you share it every weekend, you share it via email, you share it via social media, you email out about it, you text out about it, is that people rally and generously support your church because they say, man, we want to be a part of something that's blessing our community. And what you find is that in a time that really a lot of churches are getting hit financially, your finances actually go up, because people will rally around that vision and that generosity and that outreach because they want to be a part of something that's making a big difference. So I would just say almost without fail, when I talk to a church and they say, you know what, they kind of whisper it, because they feel bad, but they say, you know what, our giving is actually up 9%. Like, don't tell anybody. Normally what they're doing is every single week, it's about reaching out, and they've got an external focus, not an internal focus. They're not being in. And one last thing, and I'll be quiet on this front, is I think it's very much Book of Acts, like early church world, and what you saw the early church, and what was an incredible marker of them is just their generosity. In a very difficult time, they were known for being the crazy people who were generously like just helping other people. So I know in my background, we always talk a lot about the church getting more back to the early church and what that looked like. And so we've got a great opportunity right now to have an external focus and to bless our community. So that was the outreach side. Any questions coming in on that front? Any guys, do you have any feedback on that, or questions, follow-up questions on the outreach aspect of it? But I think if you just got your team in a room and just kept asking that question, what does our community need right now and how can we help? And then as you do those things, just be sure you're sharing what the church is doing in your weekend services. Man, one of the best things you can do as a pastor on social media is share one of those good news stories every single week. Just get out your phone and go live on Facebook for 180 seconds every week and share positive news. And I'm telling you, people will be like, I love those stories because they're so encouraging. In a world where social media is so full of strife, you're sharing about all the cool stuff that's happening. So that's one of the most effective social media strategies right now, is just every single week, get out your phone and share one cool thing that God is doing at the church. Good. 180 seconds of good news, and that will go a long way on social media. So
that's great. Ryan, thank you. Tyler, thank you. There's a couple, we've got about 9 minutes. I want to go back to two things real quick. I know you said you posted the link for the question regarding the guidelines and covenants for staff. I don't see that in the chat. Someone else may see that. If that came up, I didn't grab that. I know that's something a lot of pastors are really interested in. What can be expressed, where the legal guidelines there are, and especially when you have moderators in an online setting. So that may not have made it into the chat section. And then Tyler, you or Ryan, either one. I know one of the contributors here had a question earlier about resources for engaging students. He happens to be a youth leader, I know, and when he's talking about engaging students in an online environment, I know we talked about kids. Would there be any other context there that you guys might want to offer him with regard to how he might engage his high schoolers and those kind of things online?
Yeah, I would advise sending them some text messages, right? So they all, if it's high school, they all have their own cell phones at this point. Send out text messages, just ask them, hey, I know school just started. How are things going? I've been praying for you. And it will open up conversations. What they're looking for is connection, right? Even if they're going to school, they're sitting at lunch, they sit by themselves. Like, school's not normal right now. So those high school kids need to know that there's somebody out there reaching out to them and ready to have conversation. So I think that's a really, really important piece. And yeah, Snapchat is an awesome way to do that, but have a conversation with them. Use the tools that your folks are using, but engage with them. One-on-one communication always wins. So create ways to be able to have those conversations.
Good. Other questions in the time that we have remaining? Well, let me mention also to you that, and this has been great, what the guys have shared here at the end about community outreach and engagement, very, very important. Next month, the webinar is focused on those kind of outreach strategies, community engagement. And we've got 3 panelists, 3 pastors from around the country that are going to be sharing sort of their story and offering some suggestions. So that's something you can look for next month, an expansion of that whole topic. Is there other questions, please? Or anybody? I'm looking at the screen. All right. Yeah,
One
go
thing
ahead.
I was just going to say, I'll put a link in the comments there, kind of related to the students one, is we are hosting a live 2-day conference coming up here, and we're helping a church build out a 12-month marketing plan during the conference. One of those will be in relation to students as well. Students is a hard, tricky deal right now. So I wish I had better answers, but we are going to have some sessions on students. But if this has been helpful, I think you will enjoy the conference as well. We're going to tackle a lot of these topics, but a little bit more in depth. And then moving into like Christmas and January and Easter 2021, we've got some new ideas that we're going to be rolling out as well. So that I put that link in the chat. I also went back and put the social media policies link in the chat. That's from our friends over at Social Church. So I know that's a really, really big deal if you're having volunteers represent the church. And right now, especially in an election year with a global pandemic, it is really, really tricky right now. And you can get yourself in a lot of hot water. So I think having a social media policy for your church team, for anybody representing your church on social, look at that example template, and that'll help as well.
Fantastic, Ryan. Well, listen, let me, on behalf of our CPE team and Dr. Tomlin, let me thank all of you for taking the time to be a part of this webinar today. I've been catching the back channel chats. Everybody has been so very kind. It has been a tremendous webinar today. Thank you, Tyler and Ryan, for tremendous content and tremendous investment in all of us. And I really appreciate all that you guys have done. And we'll provide you with in the email content that you're going to be receiving. We'll also provide you the connections to both of these guys and their ministries and those kind of things, their resources, so that you can follow up with them, because they've not talked a lot about their companies, but they both have outstanding companies. We use Text to Church at my church. And then I am familiar with Ryan. I saw Ryan a few years ago on a leadership podcast. It was really outstanding. So again, both of these gentlemen serve the local church. They will be happy to work with you, and you've already captured their heart. They're full of ideas and full of enthusiasm. Let me tell you, let me go ahead and announce that the Text in Church subscription was won by Pastor Doug Holt. Doug Holt is the winner of the Text in Church subscription. So Doug, my partner Kevin Wells will be in touch with you. He'll coordinate with Tyler and we'll get you connected to Text in Church. And then Pastor Kevin Radeski, I believe he's from Pennsylvania. Kevin, I see there on the screen, you are the winner of the Church Marketing University Scholarship. So Ryan, we'll work with Ryan to get you connected to their organization. And congratulations to both of you for winning these awards. And we thank Tyler and Ryan for making them available. And again, this was the benefit of registering. So next month, when you get the invite to register, be sure and do that as well. Again, thank you for being with us today. And again, Ryan and Tyler, thank you so much for your time. We pray the blessings of God over you guys. Thank you, pastors, for your hard work, for your courage and dedication to the commitment God's called you to, the assignment that you have. Center for Pastoral Excellence loves and appreciates you so very much. You have a great day, and thank you for being with us. God bless.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Bishop.